Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and here we'll be delving into the multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland and beyond. You can contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on all social media channels, and you can contact us by either means. Hi there, tonight's show is Richard Lawrence from the Aetherius Society, and I'd just like to welcome him to the show. How are you doing tonight, Richard?
Great, thank you. Very nice to be on your show, Chris.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time out to come
Pleasure.
on. So I came across the Aetherius Society a good number of years ago while reading Arthur Gray's book on, it was mainly about the big grey man and Ben McDoo.
Yeah,
so it had a short segment in there about the Aetherius Society and towards the end of the book, and it kind of perked my interest, and I looked a bit online and looked through some of your information that he's had online. So I thought it'd be good to kind of get you on, and especially as well where kind of all the kind of stuff that's going on in the UFO subject just now, and disclosure and things like that, which we'll be getting into in a wee bit. But I'd like to kind of find out more. Mainly about, could you tell the audience, basically describe what you do in the Aetherius Society, and then maybe take it from there?
Well, the society was started in 1955, so I think we're certainly the world's oldest UFO contact organization. We might be the oldest of all kinds, but I'm not sure. I think there might be an older one somewhere in Cleveland. There's just a spotting, as it were, UFO spotting organization. That doesn't mean to say there weren't people before, but they haven't remained active, and the society has remained active. And our main sort of premise is that the founder of the society, who I knew very, very well indeed, Dr. George King, was a genuine contactee. And he was also a medium, which was extremely controversial. In fact, one great thing, I don't know, you've probably discovered this, Chris, I'm sure, and your viewers, is there's been a big change in the UFO, or I know they call it UAP now, movement, in the spiritual aspect, which we are. I mean, that's our focus, the spiritual side of the topic, wasn't welcomed at all. And, you know, there was this sort of real dividing line between, they used to call it the nuts and bolts community and the spiritual. And that's changing. I won't say it's gone away, but certainly when I brought out a book called UFOs and the Extraterrestrial Message in 2010, and I went to America when it was launched there, and MUFON, you know, over there invited me to give talks, and they at one time wouldn't have wanted any spiritual aspect, I don't think. And they now say, well, yeah, look, whether everyone likes it or not, it really is part of the movement. So I think that's a great thing. And to me and to the Aetherius Society, you can't take out the spiritual aspect and really understand the phenomenon.
So within the society itself, what are the general beliefs that's kind of transpired over the years? Or have they changed? Have they been kind of the core beliefs at the start, and have they been the same right through? Have they kind of changed slightly, or is it, so what are they overall?
It's very interesting, actually, because I was involved in writing the biography of Dr. King 3 years ago, and with a colleague of mine who runs the American headquarters, or he's the secretary of the American headquarters, and I'm the secretary here in Europe. And we wrote, both of us knew Dr. King very well, but one thing that really interested me, coming to your question, is, did he change? You know, was he the same person that I got to know in the 70s and onwards? Because he passed on in 1997. as he was when he founded it in the 50s and as he was in the 60s. Did he change? Did he change his tack? And it's really amazing, having talked to the people we could talk to who actually knew him in that period, who were still alive and knew him. No, the answer is no. He was the same person, the same essential message. I mean, it developed, but the same essential core beliefs, core claims, and the same sort of work ethic, because he was known for his work ethic. You know, whatever people say about him, they can't deny his earnest actions. I mean, he really did live it all the time. And so I would say that we haven't changed, coming to your question, that, you know, we've still maintained, and since his passing 25 years ago, we've, you know, endeavored to maintain and even make more accessible, actually, some of the teachings, the many communications he received. And those who are, we're not a massive organization, Chris, we've got, I don't know, thousands of people, as opposed to, I mean, there are probably tens of thousands who follow us and so on. Mm-hmm. But I think we're known by a lot of people, but we're not one of these sort of millions of followers type of organizations at all. And we're not, it's really aiming to be. I mean, people are welcome, but that's up to them. But the people who are in the society, they really believe it, I think. There's a hardcore of people who really believe it, really live by it, and believe that it's the answer to the world's problems.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the kind of core beliefs?
The core beliefs are spiritual service. So service is the core thing in the society. We're not alone in that. Mm-hmm. Where we differ from other service-based organizations is our approach is a spiritual one. We value, and it doesn't to say that material spirit service isn't essential, because it is, but we focus on sending spiritual energy to the world in various ways. Mm-hmm. We're focused on the Mother Earth as a living being. So ecology to us is all about the planet, Gaia, the Mother Earth, not just about preserving life for our children and grandchildren, not to live a life. It's about the Earth herself as a living entity as well. And, you know, our focus is also on the cosmic aspect. So you might say that Dr. King's mission was to bring a cosmic dimension to spiritual teaching. And I do think, you know, talking about religions, that is needed. I think that, you know, I think the Catholic Church are looking at it a bit. They don't say much, but they said,
yeah, they see they are.
Yeah, the Pope said he would baptize an alien. I mean, they are at least addressing it a little, which is more than some. I don't think the Archbishop of Canterbury said anything about it that I know of. But I think the Dalai Lama, I think all spiritual leaders are going to have to address this, because especially since the disclosure, I don't think there's any doubt really in anybody's mind, there is life out there, and there are UAPs. They are real. That's been basically come to light in the last 2 years, although here's a journal from way before my time in the society, 1958. Mm-hmm. And we were saying it, the society was saying it then.
Yeah. There's been so many different people coming out over the years in regards to governmental side of it.
Yeah.
And this seems like the kind of the more serious side to it. Actually, maybe something may come out in regards to that.
And in Scotland, I mean, I'm sure you've covered the Calvin photo, possibly more than once. I don't know, but that's near the Cairngorms, which
it's not too
very
far.
Significant to us. Ben McDewey, which you mentioned, and you know, that photo's been talked about, as I'm sure you know, since it really existed, and now mysteriously it's apparently been found. I don't fully buy the story. As revealed, but I don't fully buy Dr. David Clarke, who revealed it. Mm-hmm. I think the British government are lagging behind America on this, and other countries. Pathetic, actually. I don't know if you saw the debate in the House of Lords last year. It was absolutely pathetic.
Oh, it's terrible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so they're lagging way behind, and they probably think, oh dear, because they banned this photographic release till 2072, I think it is, or 76. Yeah. And so they thought we'd better get the photo out, so they've done it through the back door. I would think that's what they've done.
Yeah.
And David Clarke would be a willing cooperator, I would think. I can't say that for sure, if that's what the plan is. But anyway, the important thing is that it's out now. And of course, there was a sighting in that region and a photograph.
Hmm. Have you just kind of digress with some of the questions that I'm going to put through the now, but in regards to, have you seen an uptake in people joining the society since maybe the initial disclosure since 2017?
No, not an uptick. We have had people come, a lot of media interest, I'd say that. And, I sort of been regularly on the media, not only in this country, in America too, and doing many radio stations and that type of thing. Some people certainly are writing into us. We've had lots of emails and inquiries. But when they come to us, though, the message that we give is that actually UFO spotting isn't the priority, or even proving UFOs isn't the priority.
No.
The priority for us is cooperating directly with the beings behind them. And that's not everyone's cup of tea. So, to join this, I think we have a lot of people, yes, certainly, who sort of signed up to be on our email list and subscribe to that and so forth. Yes. But in terms of active participants, I don't think there's been a big increase, because it's really for the more spiritually minded person, actually a person who may not be interested in UFOs at all, but just wants to give healing to the world.
It's now where you are seeing quite a lot of more people talk about the consciousness aspect there as well. You're seeing even people like coming out like Professor Gary Nolan and other people like that talking about that, and even some things that Lou Elizondo says, they always go back and some people maybe miss some of the things they say, but they can infer there's some type of consciousness aspect here. And
indeed, and that'll continue, I think, Chris. I think we're going to get more and more and more of that, and more evidence of spiritual energy and the missing element, the higher aspect of life, you might say, because without that, you can't really understand it. Because in the end, this isn't new, is it? I mean, this has been going on for thousands of years. And well, I don't need to go on with you, because you'll know probably more than I know. But there's Vimanas, it's in the Bible, it's in the Hindu, it's everywhere. And it's been with us for. So the interesting question then is, why? What are they doing? I mean, they've kind of proved themselves to the governments, but they're not forcing the governments to change. They're not taking over the world. One of the things that we were warned about, actually, the Aetherius Society, because I was only 4 or 5 at the time, but through Dr. King, was that when the world admits, and this is in print, and we can show this in our journal at the time, when the world finally admits that UFOs are real, and they've done that in so many words this year in Congress, as you know, when that happens, though, they'll also try to make out they're hostile. And that too is going on. And that's even more ludicrous, because if they were hostile, as we said in print in the 50s, we wouldn't exist.
No, totally.
Quite obvious. They're friendly. So that's a message that we're in the Aetherius Society, we're trying to make very clear at the moment.
There are a lot of different theories on the aspect of them, or why the disclosure process is maybe saying that they're a threat and hostile or things like that. And it's mainly about the money trail, or
of course,
I know that. Not I mean, but at the same time, though, isn't it a good service to people who haven't even followed the subject, and it's the first time maybe coming to it, and I've maybe been like my wife, for example. Quite funny. My wife, she does believe, but she just doesn't want to know because she's
okay.
And it's probably out there a thing where it's not a thing where it's an ignorance thing. It's probably a fear aspect there as well. And quite a lot of people are in that camp. So they've maybe got a type of fear to maybe not just UFOs, but the unknown or the paranormal and to their day-to-day normal life. But for somebody to maybe turn around and say, this is real and it's a threat at the same time, isn't really the best place to go, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I'm lucky my wife is into it as much, if not more, than I am. I mean, she was into it before I was into it. And so, we share that in common. But I'm sure your wife is fairly typical. I'm sure there are lots of people who it troubles them. It doesn't need to, but, they don't, it poses a potential threat or whatever. And that's one thing we are trying to help with when I'm doing interviews and so on, get people over that, because that clearly doesn't exist, that threat. If it did, as I say, it would have been over a long time ago, and we wouldn't be here.
That's what It's all right. That's my good. I'm just getting interrupted by a dog and a kid. So
Oh,
just go.
all right. Okay.
Just doing the finger. Like that. Just came in for their evening of Krav Maga.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
So it's interesting. Just one other thing to try and touch on there is interesting when you mentioned about the media, maybe contacting to maybe bring forth something. But I do think as well that the media's no highlighted the subject enough in regards to get it out there, even though the disclosure process there. So what I was going to add to when you say when the media maybe contacted for things, or so when they actually decide to put that a couple of minute segment out there, and then it's buried in the rest of the news.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, although I must say, when I go up to Talk TV sometimes, and they do give me. I was on for over an hour last time I was there, but on the whole, you're right. It's a tiny little item, and then they move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And another big show, of course, which I'm sure you know, is George Norrie over in America. So he always does a good hour or two when I'm on with him. Mm-hmm. So there are exceptions, but yeah, you'll be lucky to get 2 minutes on some of the mainstream media. And if you did, to get it straight is unusual.
Yeah, that's the thing. When they cover it, it's usually a kind of tongue-in-cheek moment, or somebody staring at the sky, or I mean, just doesn't really put it in a good light.
It's childish and pathetic, but you're right. Yes,
serious topic. I mean, so moving on. So within the society as well, can you explain a wee bit about some sacred places and why there is sacred places? For example, like the mountains and things like that.
Yeah, certainly. May I just go back to the fact that Dr. King received these, because everything that we say really goes back to his context. And I would like to say that I, for one, and this might surprise you, I don't know, or some people watching, but I'm quite skeptical about people who claim contact with extraterrestrials. Mm-hmm. I think it's an extremely rare ability to be able to do that. And Dr. King was as well. He didn't go out saying, this is something everybody can do and it's easy. Yes, people can have sightings, and they do. I mean, it's probably millions of people who've had sightings.
Yeah,
certainly hundreds of thousands. And yes, on occasions they've had contacts. Very rarely they have even had sort of encounters and even been in spacecraft. That has happened. It's not very often. But to maintain a telepathic rapport with an extraterrestrial intelligence is not something that most people could do, even if they wanted to. And there's some very irresponsible teaching, if you can call it teaching, out there, which is encouraging people to do that. And also, they're sort of almost being told, look, if you want to, you can go out and you contact the Pleiades, Sirius, you name it, and become a medium. So I want to stress that point. Dr. King himself was highly trained. Prior to his contact, he'd been practicing advanced forms of yoga, which is not just sort of keep fit type yoga. I mean, advanced techniques, for those who are familiar, to do with Kundalini and so on, for 10 years, for 8 hours a day on top of his job. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know of anyone else who's done that in the West. Mm-hmm. So it's I just want to stress that he had a very unusual capability. And it's certainly not something we say is general. And in the Aetherius Society, unlike, for example, I don't know, Ashtar. I was asked about Ashtar quite recently, if you've heard of Ashtar. There are a lot of claimants for Ashtar. And I wouldn't believe them all by any means. I'm not even sure there are any genuine ones now. I'm no expert on it, but it's just something that people can do. In the Aetherius Society, the contacts that Dr. King had, it was made very clear by the communicators that they would not use another channel publicly. So therefore, people have got nothing to gain from going out and saying, well, I'm now in touch with the Master Aetherius or whoever, because they wouldn't do that. So that would immediately rule them out, really, if they made it public. No, I'm not saying no one could have a personal claim. So I just thought I'd stress that. He was a very unusual, highly trained, highly disciplined master of yoga. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons he was chosen for that particular task. But in terms of the sacred spots, very early in his mission starting in 1954 with his first contact with the Master Aetherius, hence our name, he was asked to climb 18 mountains around the world. One of them, or two of them, are in Scotland. Ben Hope and Craig and Lecken, Ben McDouey, which neighbor each other. He actually climbed Craig and Lecken, but it's the same sort of range, as it were, in the Cairngorms. And the reason, he went to Australia, New Zealand, America, Europe, other parts of Europe doing this. And the reason being to make those mountains sources of power, the energy being delivered by cosmic intelligences. But it required someone in a physical body on Earth to do this. I don't know whether we want to get into karma or not, but one of his main beliefs and practices was to manipulate karma, not to manipulate people or anybody else, or never should try to control anybody, but yourself, your own karma, and help the karma of the world. So it required someone on Earth. They couldn't just come along, because the big thing and the question that certainly we get asked all the time is, if they exist, why don't they land openly among us, prove themselves beyond any doubt, solve all the, help the hospitals, etc. And of course they don't do that, and it's because of karma. They won't interfere with us beyond a certain point. They'll help us. So him climbing those mountains, traveling physically to those mountains and climbing them, enable them to, and entering what's known as samadhi, a deep meditative state on them, enable them to charge these mountains with power, and people can go there. And people do go there regularly, including Craig and Lecken and Ben Hope, and they send out energy from them, spiritual energy for world peace, freedom, healing, and they're power centers, you might say. So they're very special places to us.
So onto that as well, I mean, one of the could you explain God manifesting as wisdom?
That's our symbol. I don't know whether this plaque behind me, you can see the symbol. And so you've got the old Hindu Sanskrit symbol for Brahma or God, and then you've got the triangle, which is a symbol of wisdom in certain parts in the West. So the combination, God to us is the absolute. It's not a person. It's not limited to religion. It's not limited to a name. You could call it, but it's been called by many names. It's not limited to a sex. It's all that there is, and more than that. It's within each one of us. That's the great thing. We all have that divine spark and that divine potential. In fact, the last book that I wrote with Dr. King was called Realize Your Inner Potential. And that's because we have divine potential within each one of us. That's the fantastic thing, really. It's not new. It's an ancient teaching, but it's a wonderful thing. So that symbol for God manifesting as wisdom is the symbol that Dr. King devised in 1955 after a long meditation lasting, I believe, 65 hours in Cornwall. He devised that particular symbol, and that's the one that we follow. And you could say it's a representation of action, wise action, service to others. Love, if you like, in action is wisdom. And it's also a representation of the teachings, because the teachings that have been given through him, and I don't expect anyone to believe this. I mean, look at them if you're interested, are to me, they're second to none. And I respect, Chris, many spiritual paths. We're not believers in a one and only way at all. So, I mean, I would look at the Bhagavad Gita, I would look at the Tao Te Ching, I would look at the I Ching, I would look at certain parts of the Bible, such as the Ten Commandments, and so on. There's great universal truths in many cultures, be it Sufi, whatever it might be. But to me, anyway, there is nothing that I have found which I consider as great as the wisdom delivered through Dr. King by what we call cosmic masters, which again isn't a sex. Master isn't male. It's beyond that. Yeah.
Going back to the disclosure process, when we discussed that, I mean, what is your general kind of thoughts on the disclosure process, on potentially why it's happening now? Could you elaborate and Did you have even any inkling this was going to happen beforehand, or?
It's interesting, isn't it? It seems like a haphazard thing, wasn't it? It was because Donald Trump put this clause into a financial bill, isn't it? That they suddenly were committed to coming up with this. And from what one can gather, there are different factions in the Pentagon, some kind of fairly in favor, like Luis Elizondo, obviously, and others who are dead against it, including, we're told, some sort of Christian evangelists within the government who didn't like it happening. So there's different views. I would say it's part of a divine plan anyway, because in the end, the truth must prevail. It's got to come out sometime. In terms of the timing, it's interesting, right in the middle of the pandemic and all the stuff that's going on, this sort of ray of light comes about. I think the governments have bad karma for lying for so long, and they lied. There's no kind word to use. They blatantly lied about this, some more than others, and now they're revealing it, which is obviously they're revealing some of it. They're not revealing it all. They're revealing some of it, which is obviously a good thing, because as soon as you get the truth out there, then other things can follow. To me, I think the thing to do now that they've done this, what I would suggest is to try and find out who these intelligences are that are controlling this very sophisticated equipment. Definitely can't, it's definitely not Russia, China. Let's just dispense with that. It cannot be. The capabilities. Funnily enough, some of the capabilities that they revealed in 2021 had been published in a book called Contacts with the Gods from Space by Dr. King. I co-authored it with him, but it was his book. It's the last book published in his lifetime. I mentioned the last book he wrote, but that hadn't been published in his lifetime. Contacts with the Gods from Space. I could even, the page numbers elude me, but it's 90 something. They are, those capabilities that came at hypersonic velocities, the ability to appear invisible, to break the sound barrier, and all the other things, to operate through various mediums and take off at great velocity. They'd all been published by us in 1996. So it was no surprise at all. But, I think the step is to go beyond that and say, okay, so now who are they? And that's where it gets a bit difficult, because there's so many claims out there. I have some sympathy for people who are trying. I could even almost sympathize. I say almost, not really, but almost, with people who give up and just say, well, who do I believe? This is ridiculous. Because I do think if you really investigate and you're really logical and you're willing to take the truth, whatever it is, even if you don't like it, even if you perhaps don't like the thought it's spiritual, you may just not like spiritual or what you perceive as religious things. But, and I prefer the term spiritual myself, free of dogma. But is it true? Could it be true even? And if it could be true, it's worth looking into.
The thing as well, when you look at, when you mentioned like the technologies, so obviously part of it's like spiritual and part of it's technology. So when you look at things, for example, where I mentioned this more in the last podcast, where you've got, for example, where UAP or UFO, I know UAP is the buzzword today, right? But seen around about nuclear facilities, around about military, things like that, right? And there's also even claims where we're using technology at a certain frequency, you can draw UFOs and UAP in to a certain degree to get more data and things like that. So that kind of seems like, if they could do that, it seems like something's reacting, like it's like a technology, like AI, that's reacting to something that's here, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. And actually, we don't believe all the UFOs or UAPs, whatever you want to call them, that are, it's like rebranding, isn't it? It's UAPs. They're too embarrassed to say UFOs because they denied it so long. But whatever they want to call them, I mean, many of them aren't manned in our view at all. As you rightly say, it could be AI under their control. But, it's interesting because, as you rightly say, there's technology and the spirituality, and in going way back, never the twain shall meet in the flying saucer movement in the old days for some people. But now they do meet. And when you get onto something like multi-dimensional existence, for example, you are in an area there where spirituality meets technology. I mean, some scientists, some cutting edge scientists are, and particularly in the sort of astrophysics area and so on, when you look at, for example, what 96% of the matter in the universe is invisible,
yeah.
whether they like it or not, they're getting into a metaphysical area.
Yeah.
And even NASA on their website is getting into metaphysical ideas without even really probably wanting to. There's no getting away from it. I mean, actually, Dr. King, way back from the very beginning in 1955, when he first went public in January 1955, and you can imagine how he was received in the conservative Britain just after the Second World War. But it didn't stop him, even though he was a shy man. He was fearless. He went right out there. He was not a publicity seeker, but he had a job to do. But, you know, even then he was saying from his very, very first transmission, as we call the message delivered in public, that they live on this phrase wasn't used, but other phrases were used, but they live in a multi-dimensional frequency existence, so that we could go to Mars and see no life there. But there is life there. We could go to Venus and see no life there. We couldn't live there. We can't conceive of life there, but there is life there on a higher frequency. That was his message really from the very beginning.
No, I understand what you mean in there.
Excuse me interrupting you, but last time I was on with George Norrie, who, as I'm sure you know, is like, you know, been at this for decades and decades and decades. He actually said to me on this show a month or two ago, said Dr. George King was way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And I think his critics would have to admit that. I mean, he was saying things from the beginning that are now getting into not mainstream thinking, maybe, but certainly general paranormal thinking, at least.
Definitely. I mean, that's it. I mean, you see now where it's finally people are starting to understand that lots of it's linked, paranormal and in general, spiritualism, consciousness, and it all connects. And I mean, people are actually starting to like put together the dots. I mean, never years and years ago, but there's a lot of things like people can see now, and you can actually connect the dots a bit better. It must have been hard in back in Dr. King's days, where you've got, as you said before, the nuts and bolts people, and you had the contactees, and then you can see now even things like organisations going back in the day, like MUFON, and found it hard to accept like experiencers or and things like that.
Yeah,
and
they were like, to him, they were Johnny come latelys. I mean, he'd been at it for a long time before MUFON ever appeared on the scene.
Yeah,
you know. But I remember when I first used to go out in the sort of very late 70s and early 80s. And if you said then on the platform or in the media, the governments are lying, there's a cover up, people thought you were a nutter. But just saying that, not even getting onto UFOs, just saying governments are lying. If you went out now and said, well, governments don't lie, you'd be, you know, certifiable, wouldn't you? That's how things have changed. But he was doing it in the 50s. He went out to Trafalgar Square, London in 1958 and had a rally for the government to tell the truth about flying saucers in Trafalgar Square. Well, yeah, he was pilloried for it, but it didn't stop him.
So think after like post-war, World War II, people generally trusted the governments.
They did.
Following that, because it was like protectionism and things like that, and they couldn't see past like the government doing anything bad. But then it's like move forward when you get like into the 80s, 90s, and you see a good trickle, even 70s, good trickle stuff coming out, and then further on now, understanding actually what was going on there, not even just in the UFO field, but right across the board with
absolutely
secret testing and everything. You know what I mean? But you're right in what you say. If you stated any of these things back in the day, you'd be like sectioned.
Yeah, exactly. And people thought, as I say, you're a conspiracy nutter was the thing they used to say. And yet it's absolutely proven true. I mean, in some ways, I suppose we could say, but we don't, it's not really important. The Aetherius Society has been totally vindicated. Because, I mean, this was being said by the Aetherius Society in the 50s. I don't think there's any organizations around now, and I stand to be corrected, in the world, who were saying this in the 50s other than us. And we've been saying it ever since, and we're still saying it now.
On another note, what do you what's your thoughts on other kind of present. I'm not going to link these together, but I mean, in regards to things like CE5,
Yeah,
trying contact movements and things like
I
that. What do
know.
you think of things like that? What's your kind of thoughts on them?
Yeah, we have been asked about that, and I don't like. We know we have a general policy not to sort of criticize any
Yeah,
other
I understand that.
organization. It's very difficult, and you've got to say great work was done in this disclosure aspect prior to CE5.
Yeah.
Fantastic work, but what I've come across lately, not from my own initiative, just people approaching us,
Yeah.
sounds to me to be dangerous if it's true, which is that people are basically being invited to go out and sort of bring about their own UFO contacts. And why I say it could be dangerous is because if you believe you're having contacts, and people might be surprised I would say this in this organization, but people believe they're having UFO contacts when they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
If they believe they're in touch with the Pleiades, as I mentioned, which seems a common claim, or Sirius, when they aren't, it might be their imagination. It might be, which would be worse for them, some kind of psychic entity from this earth, deluding them. It can lead to real problems. It can lead to mental health problems. So I think people need to be really careful. In the Aetherius Society, I myself have done mediumship, not with extraterrestrials, but with people who have died. That's not unusual. Many have done that. I find it very difficult to do accurately. And I've practiced it for 30 years. And I find it very difficult. People who say it's easy, I don't think are accurate. I go that far. They might be getting something, but I don't think they'd be very accurate. But to get to the next level, which would be the type of thing Dr. King did, I mean, he entered, and I haven't come across any medium. I'm very interested in mediumship and telepathy in all its forms. And I've written about it and written books about it. I haven't come across anyone who has claimed to use the type of trance condition that Dr. King used in mediumship. I've heard of it in sort of advanced yoga in the Himalayas and so forth for the purposes of enlightenment of themselves, but not for mediumship. He was an absolute master. I don't want to get technical here, of Kundalini. He knew exactly which of his psychic centers or chakras was active at the moment that he was receiving a transmission, and he had complete control of it. He had no recall or no memory of what had been said when he was in that trance condition. He had to actually hear tape recording himself to know what had been said, because his total focus was not on the words or even the thoughts that were being sent to him, but purely on the reception of a beam of thought that was transmitted to him through one of his chakras. It was that scientific, that precise. Now, people, you mentioned CE5, and they're not alone. I know they do other things as well, but those people, whoever they may be, if they are doing this, who are going out saying, look, take this weekend seminar and I can hook you up with an ascended master, a cosmic intelligence, Mother Mary, Count Saint Germain, a being from whatever it might be, they cannot be trusted because it isn't that easy. So you're going to end up, you might have a beautiful experience. You might enjoy it. If you're lucky, if you're very lucky and you have a contact, it might be a benign person who doesn't mind you thinking they're someone they're not. And they're really trying to help. That's if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, it could be really quite dangerous. So that would be my warning. It's a real science, this, and I think people need to be very, very careful. Now, having said all that, I don't know the full ins and outs of everything CE5. They're going out to send light, to meditate and send good vibrations and energies out to cosmic intelligences, and that's it. And then some of them have sightings, which I could believe might happen. Then that's all fine. That's more than fine. That's a great thing to do. But not if they're going to end up, demanding the presence of a UFO. And I don't know if this is even true, but this is what I've heard.
Yeah.
Or a contact. then you're getting into another area, because none of us can demand a contact.
No,
Dr.
no.
King didn't demand a contact. He was contacted. There's a big difference.
It's almost like I've not been involved in a CE5 or anything, but I mean, for what I've heard, I mean, it's almost like potentially like a conjuring without any protectionism or things like that. So that's when it can be dangerous and things as well.
Well, and also, I mean, I did come across someone who contacted us, and I certainly wouldn't name them, who said they were with CE5, and I have no idea how much they were connected to it. I know that there's a sort of disclaimer, I believe, so that no one takes any responsibility for what anybody says. That in itself is a bit of a giveaway. But this person said that, on a particular date, we want people to do something which included having an ice cream, because that will save the world. And if it wasn't, sad because they really believed this, it would be a joke. But it's not a joke. If you're going out having this ice cream thinking you're helping to save the world, you've got to do a lot more than have an ice cream. I think we all know that. But this person believes that, and they said they were connected to CE5. I'm not sure whether they are.
Maybe we have a disclaimer on the hitchhiker effect, if that happens. As well.
It would be a great way to save the world, having said that, if you like ice cream.
Totally. Or going back to sacred places, what were these locations given to him? Were the previous were the previous locations which were predominantly sacred, or were they made sacred? Does that make sense?
No, this doesn't, and let me be clear here, in any way take away from or undermine or lessen other sacred sites previous to this, of course. I mean, particularly that you think of the Himalayas, Mount Kailash, and many, many others, which are sacred. Yeah, absolutely. But in this case, he was given specific direction. He didn't choose the location. He was told, sometimes he was told at the very last minute he had to get into an area such as Aspen, Colorado, or another area. And then almost at the last minute, he'd be told which mountain to climb. There might be 2 or 3 places that he could have climbed in that area. And he was directed and given the place to go to, and he went there. And at a certain time, he was directed to climb to the top and to a particular rock, which then became holy. And he had to enter samadhi, as it's known, a very advanced, deep, meditative state, and the charge was then put through him, and possibly not just him, but if he hadn't been there, it couldn't have been put in for karmic reasons, as I mentioned earlier, into that mountain. And this is the beauty of this, mind you, is that people don't have to take anyone's word for it. You can go to these places and you can see. I mean, we go to a lot. It's called Holston Down in North Devon. It's National Trust property. We get permission. We had about 100 of us there in July, sending out energy. And we go to these places, and we've had film crews come up, and the film crews very skeptical. Might be the BBC, might be another channel. And sometimes they have come up. Some of the times the cameraman has come up, or woman, and said, I can feel the power here. They're quite amazed by it. Mm-hmm. We've had Vice up there, for example, filming, and they were really taken by it.
Mm. See, on the Scottish ones, I'm really interested in them for being from Scotland, obviously.
They're difficult climbs. I must say, I've climbed them both myself. Mm-hmm. And they aren't the easiest. And there's a health warning here, by the way. There's be, again, unlike some people, well, we won't name, we're very responsible, and you should take climbing advice, weather advice. Yeah. Let it be known in the area that you're doing it, because these aren't easy mountains to climb. They're difficult. If you don't have the right health or fitness, then don't try to get to the top. Just even if you go to the bottom. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're up a mountain in August. Called Carned Llewellyn in North Wales. Mm-hmm. And I think there was about 50 people who went on it. And we had people at different levels. So some just stayed at the bottom, some went halfway up, some went to the top. So, and be equipped with the right mountain equipment if it's a difficult. And those two, Craig and Lecken and Ben Hope, are not easy climbs, I must say, but they're wonderful mountains.
The one at Craig and Lecken, that's next to Ben McDoo, which... Yeah. There's been a lot of different phenomena reported in that area over the year. Not just mentioning like the Grey Man
No.
like that. But there's been a lot of other kind of instances where
Larry Grew.
the Larry Grew and the Larry Grew, yeah. I went and stayed up the. I had a kind of small expedition to myself just to get
Oh, really? Did you camp? Did you camp
I
there?
did. I kind of I went up the Larry Grew and I camped across for the Career Bothy, and there just right in between the Devil's Point and Ben McDoo in the middle.
Right.
But it was right in midsummer, so basically I left late at night, got in there, and then it was potentially time to go to bed, and it was like only 2 hours of darkness because it was right in the midsummer.
Right.
As well. Good walk though, nice walk. You know what I mean? So yeah, but I just found it interesting as well because there's been phenomena reported in that area.
Yes.
For many years.
Footprints, I think.
Yeah, there's been footprints and there's been sightings of like the grey
large figures have been seen.
Large figures have been seen. But even that as well, there's other kind of things where people have heard voices and music in the Larry Grew.
Yeah.
And even sometimes as well, we've been reported maybe like people going into a trance and talking to like maybe somebody on Ben McDoo. There's like stories of that and stuff.
Beautiful.
And they can't remember talking to who they're talking to.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Ben McDooey to us is particularly significant because Ben McDooey, we believe, is now a retreat of what used to be called the Great White Brotherhood. It's a kind of misunderstood name. It sounds like they're all men and they're all white-skinned. They're not.
Yeah.
They're male and female, and the majority aren't white-skinned at all. There are some. It's the body of ascended masters from Earth, not from other planets. Some are actually from other planets, but they are from Earth. And they have ascended, or bodhisattvas, they're known as in the East. And one of the places they've moved to as they're coming more westwards and more closer to, inverted commas, civilization, is Ben McDooey. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that one of the best UAP photos in the world is just 25 miles from Ben McDooey.
Yeah.
It's a very sacred place, and Dr. King himself had a contact there with a female ascended master, actually, and he camped there too on his own and had this amazing experience, which is recounted in one of his books. So yeah, that I don't know. We understand this goes back, and so if they were going to make a move like that, they'd certainly be preparing the way, possibly hundreds of years beforehand, for something as big as that.
Yeah, totally. So other things as well, where if you kind of follow what experiences are discussing, or like books on abduction and things like that, quite a lot of them refer to some type of event happening in the future, or maybe is it maybe just that, or is it maybe just a type of like the awakening of human spirit or whatever? Not I mean. Do you kind of feel the same as that, or have you had any information kind of passed down?
Very much so. I mean, there are many prophecies about the period we're living through now, really.
Yeah.
From numerous sources. I mean, from the ancient Greeks to Southern American, civilizations, to India, to the biblical, to, it's across the board. And there seems to be two common themes in these. One is sort of a period of great disasters, of flooding, of some talk about fire coming from the sky, which could be seen as nuclear problems, or conflicts, earthquakes, and so forth. So that's one thing, dire disaster. And the other that seems to go with a lot of these prophecies is that after this will come a sort of glorious new age, a wonderful period of light and illumination. This is very key to the reason why Dr. King was contacted at this time, and why these messages are now publicly available for those who are interested, because we want to soften the dire catastrophes that are due in these days, make them less severe through the various programs we have, including climbing holy mountains, but other spiritual energy output. We do a lot online. My wife did one on Sunday, for example. People can come to 12blessings.org, and you can go to Aetherius.org, and between those two, We have online services going on, which anyone can join in if they wish to, pretty well every day, as well as activities in our various centers around the world. So this is an outpouring of energy, and that's to try and soften these dire catastrophes that are due in these days, as well as missions we perform. The other thing, though, this glorious new age it's always talked about as a sorting. There's this thing about the sorting of the wheat from the chaff, and some will stay, some won't stay. We don't believe anyone's going to go to permanent hell or anything like that, or be sort of punished or even eliminated from existence. Nothing like that. But we do believe a big change will come. And in some ways, for most people, the later the better, actually, because it gives more and more people a chance to sort of turn to the light and away from selfish materialism. Let's call it that, in its various forms. So that's the period we're going through now. It's up to people, and they don't have to believe in any particular type of belief, but it's up to people to virtually choose which direction they're going to take. And if they go with it, and I hope, we hope as many of people as possible do, there will be this wonderful new age coming. We don't have a date. Many dates have been given by different people for the new age, the Aquarian age, different names for it. I think that very much depends. But as I say, in some ways, for some people, a lot of people, the later the better, because otherwise the sorting will be upon us, as it were. And then in our view, people won't be sort of eliminated, as I said, but they'll be taken to another planet, if that's what their choice is. And there they'll be able to continue this kind of existence. But those who stay on Mother Earth will have a wonderful period of enlightenment and what you might call heaven on earth, for want of a better phrase. Nirvana, if you like, in existence.
Do you think that for some, let's say, for example, for some event to happen in the future, do you think this may be why disclosures may be happening as well? Could that be a possibility of why maybe they know something we don't, or they think they know something that the rest of the general public, I'm not saying we don't, but the rest of the general public don't know, or whatever. So maybe this could be a process of why they need to try and get some of this information out there.
Well, I think, you know what they're like. I mean, they do, a lot of them in the governments and so on, they do it when they have to, when their backs are against the wall, and then they do it in as limited a way as they think they can get away with. And I think they've virtually been forced to. But in terms of the overall plan for the Earth, which is above and beyond any government, then I think I agree with you. I think it is all part of the preparation period. And first things first, let people in the world generally, anyone who's followed the news at all really properly, will now know this is not a figment of anyone's imagination. This is not a weird theory, as people used to believe. These are real craft that do exist, have amazing capabilities, including thought powers. I mean, they know what the pilots are thinking. And they are peaceful, even when pilots fire missiles at them or attempt to. That's also government records, as I'm sure you know. And they don't retaliate. We don't harm them because we're not capable of it. And they make sure, for our sake, that we don't. But these are giving them fantastic lesson, really. And we're so stupid on Earth, I think. That sometimes we can't see the absolute, I was going to use a rude word, the something obvious. It is so obvious they're there. It's so obvious they're friendly. It's so obvious they're way ahead of us. And here we are banging away with stupid conversations in Congress. And I don't get me wrong, it's better than nothing. But I agree with your point, though. I do think it's an essential thing. Disclosure has to be made. The truth has to come out prior to this new age. Yes.
I find it astounding as well when, because I follow it personally, and I've followed it for years. I mean, the subject
I can tell,
and metaphysics and things like that. But when you ask people, general public people, kind of what they think, and they do believe, and they maybe tell you a story about something, but they've never ever even heard of what's happening in America. And obviously, our governments are just totally tight-lipped about everything. Apart from they've done the Condine report and stuff and things like that. But apart from that, there's not much came for that. It was,
and not only UFOs, people are having spiritual experiences a lot, which I used to do. I have done a lot of phone-ins, not on UFOs, but on just general psychic and spiritual experiences. And I used to have a show on LBC in London. Well, it's not now. It was London then. Now it's nationwide LBC. But we had a show called The Phenomena Files on a Saturday night. Mm-hmm. We used to get people calling up, and the interesting thing to me was that most of them were not people who thought they were psychics or thought they had special gifts or abilities. They were all so-called ordinary people, if there is such a thing, who were having these experiences which were real to them, but they didn't have anyone to talk to about them. They were seeing people who had died. They were hearing, they had absolutely concrete, this is all anecdotes, I have to admit, I didn't, but they're concrete experiences of, they were, the phone would ring when it wasn't plugged in, just when they were talking about guides or something. This is going on all kinds of healing experience, wonderful healing experiences taking place. It's going on, and more will come out. And it's just been a sort of a stigma that we weren't able to, you were mocked for believing in such things. And that has gone, I think, or hopefully gone with anyone who's got any intelligence now.
It's kind of gone. Still a bit there, kind of gone, but it's getting, we're in a better place. But yeah, I mean, so can you tell me, so when you do a pilgrimage, what's the kind of the state of play, what kind of happens and stuff like that?
Well, we do some official pilgrimages, and so, for example, this year we've been to Holston Down. When I say official, I mean run by the Aetherius Society. And so we've done one to Holston Down in North Devon. We do one every year there, and we will send out energy to the world using a combination of mantra and prayer. Now, the prayers we use were delivered, and this is controversial, by Master Jesus, as we refer to him, who we believe came from Venus. We don't believe he was the one and only Son of God. Mm-hmm. We don't believe the Star of Bethlehem was a star. Mm-hmm. It obviously wasn't a star. And he gave this set of teachings called the 12 Blessings. As I mentioned, there's a site called 12blessings.org. We use prayers from that, which have a cosmic dimension to them. And we also used what you might think of as Buddhist or Hindu mantras at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we send energy out using these two ways from these holy mountains with the hands raised. Now, if it's an official pilgrimage, like in Devon, we had about 100 people. Carnarvon in North Wales, we had 50. Sometimes we'll do an official pilgrimage to Craig and Lecken or Ben Hope. But as well as that, you'll get pilgrims sometimes going up just of their own volition, and there might be 1, 2, 5 of them. It's not what I'm, arranged by us, but they know about it. They go there and they'll just send out healing. You could use your own prayers. You could use your own meditation practices. You don't have to follow any particular form. We recommend the 12 blessings because we don't think anything is more effective. If we did, we'd use something else. But that's a choice for the individual. I mean, you could just visualize. If you don't believe in God, then just visualize good. Just visualize light. It works. Send power. And then, it's been well proven on an individual healing level. And there's plenty of evidence that healing works, both over a distance and physically. But our principle is to take that to the world as a whole, not just to the individual. So we know Ukraine would be an obvious target at the moment that needs, and those involved in it on all sides. Yeah, they need enlightenment, they need inspiration, they need love to affect their consciousness, as you mentioned earlier. And that's the big thing. It's consciousness that has to change on this planet. That is the absolute key. Politics can't do that on its own. Money certainly can't do that on its own. But spiritual energy can, because it goes out. Anyone can send it out. We can all do it, and it will affect people to some degree if they accept it in, and that will change. Then you can get peace, because then people will actually want peace, because their consciousness will have changed.
Yeah, totally. So if people want to find the Aetherius Society, where's the best place to find, or can you tell them where to maybe find any of the books that you've written, or even the Dr. King? was the best places. So,
well, I would recommend people to go to Aetherius, by the way, is our spelling, Aetherius.org. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of information on that website about us, and also books and CD, or rather downloads that you can get and listen. You can listen to a transmission. And there are other websites as well. I mentioned 12blessings.org. What I will do is invite any Scottish Paranormal podcast viewers, if you wish to, come to my own website, richardlawrence.co.uk. You can contact me if you wish to. I'll be very happy to respond if I can help.
Thanks very much. What we'll do is I'll put all your links into the show notes as well.
Thank you.
And is there anything else you want to add before we finish up?
Well, just a message of hope, because I think people need it at the moment. It's very, very dark situation in many ways, in many parts. I mean, not forgetting Pakistan at the moment and with the floods there. But a lot of people don't think they can make a difference in the world. And so they feel this sense of helplessness. And I used to have a column called Body and Mind at the Observer, and I had lots of people came to me and about stress, and I discovered the most stressful feeling at its core in all kinds of situations is this feeling of helplessness. Mm-hmm. So what I would just like to say is we're not helpless. We can make a difference, even if it's a small one. You can send out positive spiritual energy just by raising the hands, visualizing white light, white because it contains all the colors of the spectrum, coming from the palms of your hands through you and out to the world. And you don't know what good you might do. You might, especially if you empower it with love and positive visualization of healing or whatever it might be, to whatever it might be to someone that you want to send healing to. It will make a difference. You might save someone's life. You might never know that you did, but it will make a difference. That would be my message, if I may give that, Chris.
Brilliant, Richard. Listen, thanks very much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Put all the links in the show notes, and we'll hopefully catch up with you again soon.
I hope so. Yeah, and good luck with the podcast.
Thank you.